rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Barakallahu feekum. It's an honor to be with all of you, inshallah. We welcome all to the 4th out of 5 part lecture series with Professor Dr. Osman Bakar from Malaysia. The theme of all the lectures are Islamic psychology from the Ghazalian perspective. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Just briefly about today's agenda, we want to welcome all of our excellent participants, brothers and sisters from all over the world, seekers of knowledge. You're most welcome. We will start by just reciting Surah Al-Fatiha and just some welcome and guidelines, and then we will present our esteemed scholar, Professor Dr. Osman Bakar, who will deliver the 4th lecture today. After the lecture with Professor Osman Bakar, we will have a short Q&A, and feel free to write all of your questions in the Zoom chat, and we will address them at the end of the Q&A session. And then we will just share some feedback forms and have some closing du'as, inshallah. Most welcome. Briefly, a little bit about the Zoom etiquettes of the session today, dear excellent brothers and sisters. Just keep on mute all the time. And no recording or screenshots are allowed, but we will upload the recordings in our YouTube channel within 3 days, as we do. And we will also provide the slides through email for all of you who have registered for the lecture series. All the questions will be asked in the chat, so the Zoom chat is available for you to use and utilize. If you have other questions as well, we will be at your service. If you need live transcriptions, please feel free to press the more button and request for those, and you will get access to that, inshallah. So just briefly, so this is a collaboration between the ISIP, the International Students of Islamic Psychology, in collaboration with ISTAC and the Al-Ghazali Chair, and IIUM, the International Islamic University of Malaysia. This is one of many projects that we will do together moving forward, and we're very honored to do this first project together with Professor Osman Bakar, which is one of the leading scholars in Islamic thought in modern era. If you're interested to know how to join the ISIP and to be part of our movement and organization, feel free to subscribe to our YouTube channel. There you can get access to all the lectures that Professor Osman has had for us so far, but also to other scholars and other lectures. We do lectures in many different languages, including English, Arabic, Turkish, Malayalam, Urdu, Bahasa Indonesian, and so forth. If you would like to be part of our resource sharing groups, we will share the links in the Zoom chat during the lecture. There you can get access to a lot of resources connected to Islamic psychology. You can also join the exclusive Al-Ghazali lecture WhatsApp discussion group if you would like to reflect and discuss the content of these lectures so far. If you want to become a member of ISIP, feel free to visit our website at www.isip.foundation. And the membership is free, and then you can also get access to our digital library with over 1,000 resources within the field of Islamic psychology. If you have any questions, if you would like to start a local chapter in your region, we have a lot of local and regional chapters all over the world, including in Malaysia, Indonesia, India, etc. Feel free to email us, or if you have any other questions in how to be part of the movement or develop projects, the email is admin@isip.foundation. Today's session is about Al-Ghazali's Alchemy of Happiness, the Crown of Islamic Psychology. And as I mentioned, recording of this session and mini assessment will be available within 3 days, inshallah. So check your email, and assessment should be completed before next lecture. And only those who complete and pass the 5 assessments will receive the e-certificate, inshallah. I also want to thank Sister Fatima Ahmed from Canada, the international coordinator for ISIP and the co-founder, for organizing and to really structure all the assessments and all the things beyond the scene and beneath the scene, we can say. She's doing an excellent work. So thank you, Sister Fatima, for all of your service. I also want to thank Sister Mariati for helping out with facilitating today's sessions. Barakallahu feekum. So let's present now Professor Dr. Osman Bakar. I think most of you already know our dear professor, but just briefly, he's a doctorate in Islamic philosophy from Temple University in Philadelphia, USA, currently holder of Al-Ghazali's Chair of Epistemology and Civilizational Studies and Renewal at ISTAC-IIUM, the International Islamic University of Malaysia, Emeritus Professor in Philosophy of Science at the University of Malaya, author and editor of 41 books and more than 300 articles on various aspects of Islamic thought and civilization, particularly Islamic science and philosophy, in which he is a leading authority. And he has been named among the 500 most influential Muslims in the world since 2009, subhanAllah. We also want to highlight that the last session within this 5-series program will be Saturday, September the 17th. And the theme will be the eternal message of Al-Ghazali psychology to the contemporary world. And as we mentioned before, only those who complete and pass the 5 assessments will receive an e-certificate. So thank you so much for attending, and please forgive us for any shortcomings. Make dua for us, and please fill out the short feedback form. And without any further ado, let me stop sharing my screen when it comes to this presentation. And let me just briefly move on to the next presentation, which is Professor Bakar's slides. Just one second here. Here we go. So Professor Osman, whenever you want me to change slide, just tell me and I will be at your service. So without any further ado, dear excellent brothers and sisters, let's give a round of digital applause to Professor Osman. The floor is yours. Most welcome, Ustad.
Thank you, Brother Said Jamaluddin and Sister Fatima for arranging this as previously was the case. I thank her and to Brother Said. Yes, welcome back to this series, to the 4th lecture. We have one more to go after this. So for those who just joined to attend this program, welcome. And those who have been already with us for the last 3 lectures, also it's nice to see you back. Yes, the topic for today is Al-Ghazali's Alchemy of Happiness. The title is, of course, is based on the book which he wrote. By the title, actually, that book is an abridgment. It's an abridgment, a summary, kind of epitome of the entire Ihya Ulumuddin, which we have already discussed in the previous 3 lectures. And the subtitle of the topic, the Crown of Islamic Psychology, and I will explain that towards the end of this lecture. In a sense, I will explain why we call this alchemy of happiness as the crown of Islamic psychology. All right, let's go to the next slide. Yes, okay, I will stay here. Now, before I discuss the topic today, just to reconnect to our previous discussion, that is important to recall the salient points of that lecture, so that we can observe this continuity of issues. Now, basically, I want to recall the salient points. First point, basically the purpose why Al-Ghazali wrote Ihya Ulumuddin. The first is what I have summarized as to revivify forgotten traditional truths, to revive or revivify forgotten traditional truths. I say forgotten because this is what Al-Ghazali said. He said that the book Ihya Ulumuddin is about the science of the path of the hereafter, which our forefathers trod, and which includes what God in his book called law, meaning here the Sharia, wisdom, knowledge, enlightenment, light, guidance, and righteousness, which he said has vanished from among men and been completely forgotten. So the word forgotten is mentioned by that, and I refer to all those forgotten traditional truth, meaning truths of revelation and truth based on the prophetic wisdom, which in reality is none other than commentary or exegesis on the Quran. In other words, the Prophet's own interpretation, which we know is the best of all interpretations. So the book is about science of the path of the hereafter. And I will, in a sense, tell later that the reason why I want to recall this point, because I want to make an assertion that the Ihya Ulumuddin is, first of all, yes, it is a book of religion, but more than just a book of religion, it is also a book of psychology. And more than a book of psychology, it is a book about happiness, about the theme of happiness. And I'm claiming that Ihya Ulumuddin is a book on the theory and practice of happiness, something what Al-Farabi 150 years earlier referred to as in his own book, Tahsil As-Sa'adah, the attainment of happiness. And Ihya Ulumuddin is indeed about the attainment, the art of the attainment of happiness. And in fact, I would say that Al-Ghazali knew about the book Tahsil As-Sa'adah of Al-Farabi. Now, the second purpose, objective of Ihya Ulumuddin, again, to revivify the declining sciences of religion. Ulumuddin, the declining sciences of religion, Ulumuddin, and the exemplary tradition of the learned, of the ulama, of the scholars, of the hukama, ulama and hukama. And Al-Ghazali said, this is a calamity afflicting religion. I have therefore deemed it important to engage in the writing of this book, to revivify the sciences of religion, to bring to light the exemplary lives of the departed imams, and to show the branches of knowledge which the prophets and the virtuous forefathers regarded as useful. So it is basically about reviving the sciences of religion, and these sciences was include the science of the hereafter. This is important, related to psychology, and also related to the theme of happiness. Now, the next point, the next objective of Ihya Ulumuddin is to enlighten the public, with knowledge of practical religion. And this is divided into parts. The first part, the science by which it approaches hereafter, is divided into the science of practical religion, ilm amalat, and the science of unveiling, ilm mukashafah. By the science of unveiling, I mean knowledge and only knowledge. By the science of practical religion, I mean knowledge as well as action, in accordance with that knowledge. This work will deal only, meaning this work referring to Ihya Ulumuddin, will deal only with the science of practical religion and not with the science of unveiling. So that is the third purpose, the third objective, the first part of it. And the second part is the science of practical religion is divided into outward science, by which is meant knowledge through the functions and activities of the bodily organs, and inward science, by which is meant knowledge through the functions and activities of the heart. the bodily organs perform either acts of worship or usages of life. Oh, can you go to the next slide, please? Sorry. Yeah. The science of practical religion, yeah, the second part of this knowledge of practical religion is divided into outward science, by which is meant knowledge through the functions and activities of the bodily organs, with regard to in Arabic al-ilm bin amal al-jawari, and inward science ilm batin, by which is meant knowledge through the functions and activities of the heart. The bodily organs perform either acts of worship or usages of life, referring to the mu'amalat, while the heart, because it is removed from the senses and belongs to the world of dominion, alam al-malakut, is subject to either praiseworthy or blameworthy influences. Right. So this is the third objective, and I'm claiming that this one is both parts also related to the pursuit of happiness. Okay, the next slide, please. Next slide. Problem? Well, anyway, I go ahead. This is something a problem there with a technical thing. The fourth objective, to guide the public. Yes. Okay, thank you. To guide the public in its understanding of the outer and the inner dimensions of religion. So as far as the outward science, the outer science, which pertains to the bodily organs, is subdivided into acts of worship, ibadah, and usages of life, and the inward science, which relates to the conditions of the heart, and the qualities of the soul, akhlaq and nafs, is subdivided into things which are praiseworthy, mahmoud, and things which are objectionable, madmoon. Together, these constitute the four parts of the science of practical religion, which we have already realized. But I'm recalling this because I want to connect this to the issue of happiness. Yeah? Because the well, in order to see that, let us proceed to the next slide, please. Yes. Now, what is the connection between happiness and ihya, the overall ihya? I'm establishing, and I'm trying to establish that that connection. So I'm saying that first, the four main objectives of the ihya, which I read just now, all right, are all concerned with the means of attaining happiness, even though the word happiness is not explicitly mentioned in any of them. What I mean is that I'm taking here now my argument. I'm arguing that in order to realize these objectives, all right, or the realization of these objectives are necessary conditions for the attainment of happiness. If we read again these four objectives and analyze the content, what is being said about these objectives, and knowing, let's say, the theory of happiness that was, for example, discussed by Farabi. So basically, first of all, it is related to psychology, because in order to attain happiness, the issue of happiness is related to the transformation of the soul, the purification of the heart, which is what Islamic psychology is all about. The ultimate goal is happiness. But in order to talk about, or rather, in order to understand this essence of happiness, need to go all through those things that we discussed in the whole of the year. Now, so I'm saying, therefore, here is indeed a great work on the theory and practice of happiness. Now, there are distant arguments. I mean, in arguments, there are many kinds of arguments, very, very general arguments that are further removed from the issue of happiness. But to me, here comes the help from Al-Ghazali himself. His book, Alchemy of Happiness, Alchemy of Sada, that book, all right, provides the proof that they are looking for. Of course, that is the essence of proof. But the rest of the materials of the year are all related to this, the alchemy of happiness. So, all right, Al-Ghazali wrote an abridgment, khulasa of here, which he titled The Alchemy of Happiness. Now, how do I interpret? Why is my interpretation? My interpretation is that this little book, it's not a big book, right? It's not the last book. This little book is the essence of here. So if you look at the 40 books, 4 volumes, 10 books is volume of the year. Now we have the epitome of it, the summary of it, I call the essence, the essence of it, provided by the author himself, right? And that's significant because he titled that abridgment Alchemy of Happiness. So in other words, the Alchemy of Happiness, the title has relevance. The call here is about happiness. The proof is provided in this abridgment. Now, poetically, we may say the heart of Ihya, the heart of Ihya, the books, the work, is Ihya of the heart. I find very interesting in a sense to understand Al-Ghazali's insight. Yeah. So the essence of the Ihya al-Muddin is none other than the Ihya of the heart itself. In other words, the heart which is dead, the heart which is dormant, the heart which is sleeping, and the heart which is not active. Now you are giving life to the heart, of course, giving spiritual life to the heart. So the essence of Ihya al-Muddin is about that, is one giving life to the heart, and which is what Alchemy of Happiness is all about. Yeah. So the Ihya of the heart is a spiritual process. The Ihya of the heart is a spiritual process that entails a transformation of the soul, which is key to attainment of happiness. The connection between Ihya al-Muddin and Ihya of the heart is a great insight from Al-Ghazali, I would say. I'm reflecting upon that. I find this is very, very interesting insight from Ghazali, and therefore the book is very, very well planned, well designed. Something that is an inspired work. It is really an inspired work. Yeah. Here we translate in the sense of revivification, not just simply revival, because the English word revivify is about animating something, in a sense, the injecting life to something that is dead. All right. So this, in other words, now, in the sense, I'm what I'm trying to convey is that connection between happiness and ihya. All right, let's go to the next slide, please. Now, of course, I want to basically what I would like to discuss now is the important to discuss what are the important messages from Alchemy of Happiness. Maybe some of you have read, others have not read. Certainly, I would encourage you to read, especially if you have not read all the books, the entire book of the Ihya. So, because this is a summary, it is very, very helpful. Something like exactly trying to help us in order to understand the core message of the Ihya. All right, you can read just my book, Alchemy of Happiness. Basically, that is the essence of the whole Ihya Ulumuddin. All right, now I put there as to introduce the points that I want to talk about, important messages in the Ihya, quoting from a prophetic hadith. Since you are talking about happiness, want to talk about happiness. Happy is he who does now that which will benefit him after death. Yes, the whole purpose of the practical religion. What is the purpose of practical religion? The purpose of practical religion is to provide all the means, the knowledge, the necessary practices to basically to prepare or to attain that supreme happiness after death, and happiness here on earth, as also mentioned by Farabi. Of course, it's talking about philosophy. The objective of philosophy is to arrive at happiness here in this world, and of course the supreme happiness in the hereafter. Now, this hadith, and then here is as if our lives are kind of investment here on earth, and if it is based on the religion, aside from practical religion, then we'll earn happiness. In our practical religion, will grant happiness to us here while here on earth, and of course, what we do here will benefit us in the posthumous life. Now, it's quite interesting how Al-Ghazali began his book Alchemy of Happiness. First, he said, God sent prophets to teach men the science and the art of prescription or the spiritual alchemy of happiness and how to purify hearts. Al-Ghazali did not refer to the verse of the Quran when he mentioned that, all right? But we may refer to the Quran in Surah Al-Baqarah, verses 38 and verse 112. You can refer yourself, but basically the verse, the Surah Al-Baqarah, verse 38, is the, in other words, I'm referring here to the when Allah Subhanahu wa Taala ordered, commanded Adam, Eve, and Satan to go down to earth. Yeah. So and then God said, "Qul bitu minha jami'a, fa imma ya'tanakum minni hudan faman tabi'a hudaya fala khawfun 'alaihim wa lahum yahzanun." Fala khawfun, there's no fear then, and there is no sadness, there is no grief. Meaning here is interpreting as the absence of sadness, the absence of fear, which is one definition of happiness in the Quran. The Quran talks about happiness both in the affirmative sense and in the negative sense, to negate what happiness is not. Happiness is not, and what happiness is. What happiness, in the case of the verse 38 of this of Surah Al-Baqarah, it is mentioning what happiness is not. Yeah. But in the case of the surah, in the case of verse 112, there you have also the affirmative one. Yeah. Referring was that falahu ajru inda rabbih. That together mention both the negative and the affirmative. Yeah. Falahu ajru inda rabbih wala khawfun alayhim wala hum yahzanun. So ajruhu inda rabbih, that is the positive one. Of course, since happiness is of various degrees, the Quran just used the word ajruhu, this is a reward for him. Yeah? Now, it's very interesting. God, that in other words, Al-Ghazali brings up something which is seldom discussed nowadays about the prophetic function. The prophetic function. We know normally what we remind about prophets is just to bring the Sharia. Basically the Sharia giving function, the law giving function. God as the law giver. God as the lawgiver, but there is another function that is given to every prophet, since it is more hidden, it is more a kind of inner than few people notice about that. So this is what I call the saintly function. We have the principle in Islamic thought. Every prophet is also a saint, but not every saint is a prophet. Just in the case of Al-Farabi, said that each prophet is a philosopher, but not every philosopher is a prophet. So God sent prophets, and Al-Ghazali mentioned there 124,000 prophets. So God sent these 124,000 prophets to teach man the art of prescription of the spiritual alchemy of happiness. In other words, the prophet is the perfect alchemist. He's the perfect alchemist. Now, alchemy also science, which is well developed in Islam and in many other civilizations, especially in the Chinese civilization. Now, there's been a lot of misunderstanding about this subject called alchemy. There are two dimensions. There are two types of alchemy. One is a spiritual alchemy. The other is the physical alchemy. All right. From the physical alchemy in Islamic science, in traditional Islamic science, basically what gave rise later to the modern chemistry. But there's a difference here, because in Islamic civilization, somehow there was a kind of a connection between physical alchemy and spiritual alchemy, whereby the metals, their studies in alchemy were understood as symbols. In order to understand the spiritual alchemy that is going on inside human beings, that's performed by the alchemists. In other words, they use metals as symbols. There is, for example, a symbol of gold to apply to the purified heart, to the pure heart. The idea, in the sense of the golden heart, refers to that. Basically the output of the alchemy of of alchemy. So anyway, Ghazali began the book Alchemy of Happiness by mentioning that God sent prophets in order to teach the science and art of alchemy. And this, we go now to the next one, the treasuries of God. Ghazali is all these important. This one I'm just taking from Ghazali. Yeah? The treasuries of God in which the alchemy is to be sought are the hearts of the prophets. So it is the hearts of the prophets that we should understand. We should know if you want to understand this nature of spiritual alchemy. So basically, it is a heart-centered alchemy, and prophets were perfect alchemists. Now, further, Ghazali said this alchemy has 4 elements of knowledge and 3 elements of practice. The elements of knowledge are, all right, knowledge of the self, knowledge of God, knowledge of this world as it really is, and knowledge of the next world as it really is. So basically, alchemy as a science has 4 elements of knowledge, which Al-Ghazali proceeded to discuss. But all these are summarized in some summaries of what we discussed in greater detail in the books of the Ihya. All right. And as far as the elements of practice, first, self-examination, muhasabah, remembrance of God, dhikrullah, and the love of God. So these are the 3 elements of practice. We understand normally when we use alchemy, in other words, we have different elements, the ingredients of a process. Right? Somehow, each gradient, each element interacts with is combined with the other elements. So a process took place in which a transformation took place, and it was basically that is the idea of alchemy, right? So this yes, I think this is the important points as far as the book Alchemy of Happiness. Can you go to the next, please? Yeah. No, it's wrong. Not this. Yes. Okay. All right. Now we go and discuss briefly a bit of each of that constituents, that elements, the elements of knowledge and the elements of practices, which Ghazali introduced the book. All right. Now, what did Ghazali say about self or real self-knowledge? Real self-knowledge consists in knowing the following things. What are you in yourself? Basically the same as who are you? Or who am I? Where have you come from? Whither are you going? For what purpose have you come to tarry here a while? In what do your real happiness and misery consist? Some of your attributes are those of animals, some of devils, and some of angels. And you have not and you have to find out which of these attributes are accidental and which essential. And the italics, the italics are, hello, please. Yes. Till you know this, you cannot find out where your real happiness lies. So if we are looking for happiness, we should begin with this real self-knowledge. Here's just a summary. It looks easy, yeah. Or it's not a difficult question, but in real life, in reality, it is difficult. we have to know a lot of things. In other words, the preconditions in order to be able to understand this question, to answer this question. So this just basically is the beginning. But the point that emphasized by Ghazali is this: if we don't know this, if we don't know how to answer, or we don't know the real answers to this question, then we cannot find out where our happiness lies. In other words, he is arguing that if you are looking for happiness, you must answer, you must look for knowledge in order to answer this. Who are you? Where do you come from? Where are we going? Why are we here in this world? And what's the meaning of real happiness? And what is misery? What is the nature of happiness? What is the nature of misery? And we are reminded, as human beings, some of attributes are of animals, some of devils, and some of angels. Now, which are the accidental? Meaning that they are transient, they exist, they come and go. All right. In other words, not everlasting, but which is essential. So they said we have to dissect ourselves. We have to understand ourselves. What accidental and what essential. So that is the first thing that Al-Ghazali, in a sense, discusses in the book Alchemy of Happiness, called Real Self-Knowledge. And we are reminded by that Prophet Hadith, he who knows himself knows his Lord. And of course, I mean, in studying ourselves, we can spend our whole life just knowing our physical body. But physical body is accidental from this perspective. What is essential is our inner reality called the soul, the heart, the aql, the intellect, the spirit, the ruh, that we have already discussed earlier. So that already Ghazali has explained in detail in the other books of the Ihya. But just to summarize, to students of happiness, those students who want to study happiness, start with these questions. All right, can we go to the next slide? Now, again, I produce here a hadith, which also found in the book Alchemy of Happiness. This is hadith which very much emphasized by Al-Ghazali. God created man in his own likeness. Now, I quote here. Basically, now because basically this is about the knowledge of God. The next element in the alchemy. The next element in the alchemy is knowledge of God. Ghazali's summary is: now, God is one in his essence, without any associate, single with any compare, eternal without any opposite, separate without any like. He is one, ancient, qadim, with nothing preceding him, eternal, azali, without any beginning, abiding in existence with none after him, everlasting, abadi, without any end, subsisting without any cessation, abiding without termination. He has not ceased, and he will not cease to be described by the epithets of majesty. At the end of time, he will not be subject to dissolution and decay, but is the first and the last, the outward and the inward, and he knows all. This is the second book from the second book of the Ihya, Kitab Qawaid al-Qaid, So if you want to understand basically to have the knowledge of God, the fundamentals of the knowledge can be obtained from that book. For those who are looking for this happiness, that is important to have knowledge of God. And further, he emphasized, explained further, I said, Allah is living, knowing, willing, hearing, seeing, and speaking through life. Power, knowledge, will, hearing, sight, and speech, not solely through his essence. Now, you can see here the connection now. God created man in his own likeness, the Prophet said. So it's clearly from the description about God here. I mean, we see the likeness. In other words, man has the likeness of God, but of course we know the difference between God and man. God is absolute, infinite, but relative in the case of the human being. But the point is that by knowing the attributes of human beings, the spiritual attributes, in order to understand that will help us to understand the nature of God. Of course, God is transcendent to human being. In other words, there is also the aspect of beyond comparison between man and God. But God is also immanent. God is also immanent, meaning that God has attributes that are like human attributes. That's what God has given us. So that's why Al-Ghazali started with the knowledge of the self, because by knowing the self, the essentials, we discussed already previously. I don't want to go into that again, but the point here, in order to look for happiness, in the search for happiness, we have to know God, because he is the source of everything. He's the source of everything. In order for us to become the perfect human being, we have to know God. We have to follow God and so on. So therefore, it is essential. So the point of Ghazali here, it is not possible to attain happiness if we reject God. Well, some people argue, well, there are people who don't believe in God, they're happy. Well, the question is, what is happiness? What is happiness? And the happiness that is lasting, not transient happiness. We have, in order to have real happiness for Al-Ghazali, you have to go through this to understand the second element in the Alchemy happiness, which is knowledge of God. All right, go to the next slides, please. So the third element here, knowledge of this world. So Ghazali makes the point, I mean, that you can spend the whole life trying to study about the world, but without really realizing what actually is what this world is for. So today we live in a civilization in which we devote entirely the whole of our life to the study of this world, because we don't know because we have already rejected the God, the knowledge of God. That is not important. So the concentration is on knowledge of the world. But whereas Ghazali reminds us, if you are looking for happiness, then you should be aware then about the nature of the world in which we live. While man is in this world, two things are necessary for him. First, the protection and nurture of his soul, which means the cultivation of virtue. We have to cultivate the virtues, the qualities of the soul that will save us, that will give happiness. Happiness depends on how we nurture our soul, and therefore depends on the kind of education and upbringing that we have. And today we know, I mean, this is not something that we give importance. We take care more of our body rather than the soul. Yeah. Yes. Secondly, the care and nurture of his body. The proper nourishment of the soul is the knowledge and love of God. If we are sincere, if we really care about the condition of our soul, the health of our soul, the enlightenment of our soul, then we have to give the proper nourishment, which is knowledge of God and the love of God. And to be absorbed by the love of anything but God is the ruin of the soul. The body is simply the riding animal of the soul and perishes while the soul endures. The soul should take care of the body. That is, I mean, that is the most important thing. If we miss this point, then we are going to miss. We are going to miss the happiness. In other words, we won't find lasting happiness by concentrating on this world, because of many reasons, spiritual reasons, because we are not of this world. Right? Now, Al-Ghazali gives a very interesting analogy, or rather on an allegory. The world is like a table spread for successive relays of guests who come and go. There are gold and silver dishes, abundance of food and perfumes. The wise guest eats as much as is sufficient for him, smells the perfumes, thanks his host, and departs. But the foolish guest, on the other hand, tries to carry off some of the gold and silver dishes, only to find them wrenched out of his hands, and himself thrust lost, disappointed and disgraced. And that's it. Actually, in the I just select here because there are other the allegories, all right, that used by Al-Ghazali about this world to show that the real nature. What is the real nature of the world? What is the real purpose? Our purpose on earth. All right. So that is, in other words, those who are looking for happiness should pay attention to what the word really means for us. Okay. The next one, please. Now, the knowledge of the next world. Actually, just want to remind us that the reason of the human spirit seeking to return to the upper world is that its origin was from that, from the spiritual world, and that it is of angelic nature. It was sent down into this lower sphere against its will to acquire knowledge and experience, as God said in the Quran. And now this is referring to the Quran, the verse which I mentioned earlier. Go down from here, all of you. And if, as sure, there comes to you guidance from me, whosoever follows my guidance, on them shall be no fear, nor shall they grieve. Right? Yeah, Al-Ghazali wants to remind us, it is since we have a spirit, right, which is the real essence of the human being, and its origin is not from this world, but from another world, the spiritual world. Just that, according to God's plan, we have been put here on earth, and the purpose is to gain knowledge, right? To serve Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to be of service to Allah, so that we will be successful. We have a successful conclusion. Now, he did not discuss in detail in the book he did not discuss in detail in the book Alchemy about this heavens and hell, but just to emphasize to the seeker of happiness, then there is another reality which is different from the world you are in, another reality which is more permanent, which is more real, in fact, which is more real, and we should prepare ourselves for that. So happiness is to be obtained by making the best use of our stay here on earth in preparation for that reality. Now, it is interesting, while talking this, Al-Ghazali was very much concerned, certainly before this lecture. I have also referred to that, how Al-Ghazali looks at his own time. He saw many people during his time abandoning religion, many who don't believe in the afterlife, and so on. That was during his time. And the kinds of arguments, some of them are quite the same what we have today in terms of the nature of the argument. But the point is, during his time, there were many people who deny posthumous life, all right? And it was interesting because I reproduce here from the little book Alchemy of Happiness. This Al-Ghazali said, to the deniers, to those who deny posthumous life, Al-Ghazali posed this question. Do you really think that the 124,000 prophets and saints who believe in the future life were all wrong? And you are right in denying? This is his argument with those who deny the posthumous life, those who deny the hereafter, deny in the judgment, in last judgment, by taking something which Islam emphasized. Islam says that from Adam alayhi salam until the Prophet Muhammad, 124,000 prophets all teach that there is life after death. So Al-Ghazali said, you mean to say that all these 124,000 prophets were wrong in their belief about the future life? In addition to these prophets and their saints, many thousands of saints who also believe. That's left to in a sense, to us to reflect on that, to address to those who don't believe. Okay, the next question after the next knowledge of the next world. Yes, please. Now, this interesting, in this little book, all right? Out of so many different things on the here, Al-Ghazali put in his summary, in such considers very important, the subject of music and dancing. Music and dancing, and which I title here, Music and Dancing as Catalyst to Alchemy of Happiness. Music and dancing as catalyst to alchemy happiness. Al-Ghazali looks at music and dancing as aids to spiritual life, and of course referring to happiness. And we all know that this, in other words, people feel happy. People get a sense of being happy by listening to music and performing, dancing. But the point here is Al-Ghazali took this as something. It's only this, and the other one is marriage, the question of marriage. That is left out in the summary, but this one is part of summary. So he realized that during his time, I mean, in other words, there was debate about about music and dancing. There were many people. I mean, in the center, there were different groups of people, different attitudes. So the interest of Ghazali is just the relevance of music and dancing to spiritual life and to the pursuit of happiness. So this is what it said. Basically, addressing those who say that these are against religion, dancing and music and dancing are prohibited by religion. They have nothing to. They are irrelevant to religious life, and this is what I said. Right? Music and dancing do not put into the heart what is not there already. This is a very, very interesting argument. Right? Music and dancing do not put into the heart what is not there already. In other words, whatever is in the soul, the tendencies, the attitudes from other sources. So music and dancing do not put into that. But music and dancing only fan into a flame dormant emotion. Therefore, if a man has in his heart that love to God, which the Sharia enjoins, it is perfectly lawful, even laudable in him to take part in exercises which promote it. On the other hand, if his heart is full of sensual desires, music and dancing will only increase them and are therefore unlawful for him. While if he listens to them merely as a matter of amusement, they are neither lawful nor unlawful, but indifferent, mubah. But the mere fact that they are pleasant does not make them unlawful any more than the pleasure of listening to the singing of birds or looking at green grass and running water is unlawful. This view, this position taken by Ghazali is different from that of many jurists, right, who say it's prohibited. They are simply saying that they are, they are destructive. They are, in a sense, they are not positive to the to religious life, spiritual life. Why I say interesting? Because Ghazali here is taking a kind of psychological approach to making a legal judgment pertaining to listening to music and performing dancing. If you remember, in my first lecture, I talked about the different psychological perspectives of Ghazali. One of which was the psychology of jurisprudence, the role of psychology in jurisprudence. And here we see here now an example of that. Now we have a very clear example of how the Ghazali's perspective and position on music and dancing. It depends. In other words, it depends on the purpose. It depends on the purpose for which those two, music and dancing, were performed. His point is that the music and dancing not unlawful if it is in other words something which religion which enjoins, and certainly there's that relationship between music and spirituality. In other words, music can help a spiritual life, but what he said is prohibited for those whose heart is full of sensual desires, because by listening to music and foreign dancing, they only make it more pronounced in his sensual desires. All right. So the next, and of course, Al-Ghazali, being a Sufi, I mean, he was referring, of course, to the wide practice of music and dancing, referring to the sacred dance of Sufism. So he was defending that, which is whereas it's opposed by many legal jurists for on different grounds based on different arguments. Yes, the next one, please. Yes, I said this is the second one, second issue from the Ihya, which enters into the essence, into the summary of into the book Alchemy of Happiness. Basically, is marriage a source of happiness or misery? This is not. It is an important question. Today, I mean, if we to answer this question, I mean, you have seen what is going on in our society, the various manifestations of marriage. Yeah, it is very rare. People will cite marriage as kind of a source of happiness. There are many broken families, broken homes. In other words, if you want to answer this question empirically, well, you need a lot of studies by social science researchers in order to estimate a kind of to have a kind of feeling of what the situation is in society. It looks like the answer given by Ghazali here is kind of a sense of make us laugh, make us laugh. But if we actually it's serious. I mean, it is a serious answer. And when I read that, I mean, Ghazali is addressing the issue. He's addressing the issue, even though people may not like that, and people feel, oh, this is too ideal a situation. In reality, it cannot be that. Can we follow this? But from the perspective of Ghazali is talking about the pursuit of happiness. You're talking about happiness, then you have to give a deep thought to what he's saying. I just selected two here, yeah, to give us hints on how to answer, or how should you answer this question. Is marriage a source of happiness, or is it a source of misery, or sadness, or problem? One, Ghazali said, again, going to the psychological basis of it. Man has a lower nature. Man has two natures: one higher nature, the higher soul, and the lower soul, which is the animal soul. Man has two natures: the angelic nature and the animal nature. Until he can control his own lower nature, he had better not assume the responsibility of controlling another. Yes. Man has a lower nature. If you cannot control your lower nature, taking to address to man, don't think of taking responsibility to control the nature of another. In the wife. That's what it's referring to the wife. And the other one is he who thinks he can concentrate himself better on his religious duties by not marrying, had better remain single. And he who fears falling into sin, if he does not marry, had better do so. So today, if people want to follow this, many will not be married. Maybe many people disqualified from getting married if based on this, what Al-Ghazali is saying, from Ghazali is right from the perspective of happiness, pursuit of happiness. This answer is appropriate. Now, why we have a lot of marriages without happiness? Precisely because this points. I mean, Al-Ghazali is right here. Okay, next. Yes, now I want to go to the subject of degrees of happiness. How Al-Ghazali views the degrees of happiness. The most important here is the love of God. The love of God is one of the sections of the book, Alchemy of Happiness. It is very important section because this is where the real, in a sense, the crux of the matter, which question of happiness, the real happiness, or still we can talk about degrees of happiness, because different people have different capacities, different capabilities, different attitudes. So in other words, different achievements, spiritual achievement. But the point is still it's all concerned with happiness. Well, first let me here give Al-Ghazali's definition of love. Love may be defined as an inclination to that which is pleasant. This is apparent in the case of the five senses, each of which may be said to love that which gives a delight. So, yeah, what gives us a delight? We love that. Thus, the eye loves beautiful forms, the ear, music, etc. This is a kind of love we share with the animals. But there is a sixth sense or faculty of perception implanted in the heart, which animals do not possess, but through which we become aware of spiritual beauty and excellence. Al-Ghazali is arguing that there is spiritual beauty and excellence which is different from physical beauty. Now, a man who is only acquainted with sensuous delights cannot understand what the Prophet meant when he said he loved prayer more than perfume or women, though the last two were also pleasant to him. Yes. One of the things that the Prophet loved most is salat, prayer. Those who don't perform the prayer cannot appreciate what the Prophet said. Even those, certainly the Muslims, some Muslims who pray, but who they may not also appreciate that if they really don't realize, in other words, the objectives of prayer, or they don't experience the kind of prayer which is what is called a prayer in which is really concentrated, this kind of deep concentration, all right, which in the case of the prayer of the Prophet, the prayer of the muttaqin, the prayer of the true servants, God, all right, those who has accomplished in prayer. It's beautiful. So prayer is beautiful to the Prophet, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So hymn of prayer there. Now, but he whose inner eye is open to behold but he whose inner eye is open to behold the beauty and perfection of God, we despise all outward sights in comparison, however fair they may be. So it's a question of differences between spiritual experiences, but then it's connected to happiness, because we are happy with what is beautiful. And here and the question about love, the love of God, and Al-Ghazali started that with definition of love, but he distinguished between the love of the physical beautiful form and the love for the beautiful form, and especially what he called the beauty and the perfection of God. The beauty of God. God is beautiful. Yeah? God is Jameel, beautiful. And the perfection, Kamal. Yeah? So these are things which are spiritual in nature. Next point about the love of God. Next slide, please. Yeah. Now, Ghazali says human perfection resides in this, that the love of God should conquer a man's heart and possess it wholly. And even if it does not possess it wholly, it should predominate in the heart over the love of all other things. So here, Al-Ghazali is talking about perfection, to be a perfect, to attain human perfection. That is, and he equated that with the love of God and the heart's attitude towards the love of God. In other words, to what extent is the love of God occupy the heart, fulfill, or rather fill the heart of the person? The heart of the person, the heart of man who is filled with the love of God, he is achieving perfection and, of course, happiness. Now, the next one, all Muslims are agreed that the love of God is a duty. God says, according to God says concerning the believers, He loves them and they love Him. God loves them and they love God, and they love God. And the Prophet said, till a man loves God and His Prophet more than anything else, he has not the right faith. Right? That is still talking about here the importance of love of God in relation to faith, to perfection. So if earlier indeed it's related to perfection, now the question of the question of faith, the relationship between faith, the quality of faith. The quality of faith is defined in terms of to what extent we love God, even though the Sharia prescribes this love of God as a duty for everyone, but in reality, not everyone attains that station. Now the next one is Allah alone is worthy of our love, and if anyone loves Him not, it is because he does not know Him. Why don't we love Allah? One answer is that because we don't know. We do not know Allah. So how can we expect to love Him? This is Ghazali's argument. Now, whatever we love in anyone, we love. Whatever we love in anyone, we love because it is a reflection of Him. It is for this reason that we love Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, because he is the prophet and the beloved of God. And the love of learned and pious man is really the love of God. Of course, what Ghazali is saying, that to say love of God and nothing else, it does not mean then there is no place for love of creature. There is, provided that, of course, the love of that creature reminds us of the love of God. It's just in the case of the Prophet sallallahu. So it is not, in other words, it is not something that is contrary Yeah? In other words, loving Allah and loving the Prophet at the same time, it is logical, it makes sense, it's not contrary to logic, or it goes contrary to what we said, to love only God. Yeah, we love Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam because he reflects Allah. He is the messenger of Allah. He is the prophet of Allah. Yeah, what you call this? He's the beloved of Allah, and that applies also. Besides the prophet, the learned and the pious man. Why we like them is because of Allah. Okay, next, please. Still talking about degrees of happiness. Now maybe I'm coming closer to the my lecture. This is important. The vision of God is the greatest happiness to which a man can attain. This is emphasized by Al-Ghazali. Vision of God. To see God. To see the face of God. Wajhullah. Yeah? Which, of course, be interpreted to mean the names of God, the qualities of God. But the vision of God is the greatest happiness to which a man can attain, but it's something to be realized. Yeah, we may accept intellectually, but this is a matter, it's a question of spiritual experience. Now, the next point, the higher the subject matter of our knowledge, that is the word missing there, our knowledge, the higher the subject matter of our knowledge, the greater is our delight in it. Seeing that God is the highest possible object of knowledge, the knowledge of Him must afford more delight than any other. He who knows God even in this world dwells, as it were, in a paradise, the breath of which is as the breath of the heavens and the earth. Is from the Quran, Surah 57, verse 21. Al-Ghazali cites this verse in support of the point, and then even here on earth, not in the hereafter, while still here on earth, someone who knows God is already, in a sense, in a kind of paradise, the breath of which is as the breath of the heaven and the earth, meaning that the kind of bliss in which that person who knows God. To emphasize the point, how important is that the believer should know God. Basically, what we call the traditional knowledge of Tawheed, which unfortunately today is being neglected. Yeah? Less and less people really care, really, to study in depth, to know more about God, to understand at-Tawheed, ilmu Tawheed. Now, the next thing, the next quotation from Al-Ghazali. Yes, it is important. It is important to have the knowledge of God, but Al-Ghazali argues that, yes, still the delight of knowledge falls short of the delight of vision. In other words, to know God is none of the same quality as to see God. Delight of knowledge is not the same as the delight of vision. Just as our pleasure in thinking of someone whom we love is much less than the pleasure afforded by the actual sight of this person whom we love. So very logical kind of analogy. We love someone, we're just thinking of that person without actually seeing that person. But how happy we are when we actually come face to face with that person. Same thing, knowing knowledge from afar, in a sense, just based on rational knowledge of God, which people now just by studying theology for example, to get some knowledge about God, but that is not the same as saying of God. As we say in Islam, ilmu yakin is not of the same quality as ainul yakin. Two types of, 2 degrees of certainty. Which is very emphasized by Muslim thinkers. All right, I think we still have some more. I think I have some more. What talking about degrees of happiness, the list of gods. Yes, please. The next. Yes. Now, Al-Ghazali is talking about the love of God. There must be signs. There must be many signs that we love God. The signs of the love of God, that how we love God, to what extent. So one of the important signs of the love of God given by Al-Ghazali is this. He said, the remembrance of God should always remain fresh in a man's heart without effort. I emphasize, without effort. All right. In other, what he's saying, what he's implying, there are people. Yeah, you can force people to say the name, to invoke the name of God 10 times or 100 times. You can force, yeah, but that the effect of that force will quickly, tire, will wane. But here is without effort. In other words, because yes, for what a man loves, he constantly remembers. So it is because a person loves God that he invokes his name often, constantly remembers. And if his love is perfect, he never forgets it. He will not forget God. He will always remember God. That is the very important sign that someone loves God. Now, it is possible, however, that while the love of God does not take the first place in a man's heart, okay, where's the second place? He said, the love of God may take the place. Try to think about it. This is two degrees of love. Yeah, one is someone loves God, but another person, yes, loves God less than the other person. But at least, even if that's not that much, that person loves the love of God. It's quite interesting. To love the love of God. Let's say, for example, let's say just say hard work. In other words, someone works hard, right? But you don't work as hard as that person. But still, you like the people who works hard. You like the people who works hard, even though you yourself do not work as hard. So it is in the same case here. Yeah, someone loves God, another person does not love God as much, but still he loves the love of God. So for love is one thing, and the love of love another. And I come to the my last statement here from the quotation from Al-Ghazali, from the Alchemy of Happiness. Please can go back the. Yes. Our future happiness will be in strict proportion to the degree in which we have loved God here on earth. This is a very, very important statement from Al-Ghazali. I repeat, our future happiness, meaning the happiness in the next world, in the future world, the life you have done. What kind of happiness we have there will be in strict proportion to the degree in which we have loved God here on earth. So there is continuity between happiness on earth and happiness in the next world. You cannot expect in order to have happiness in the next world without happiness here. That's why it is a point emphasized by the Sufis, by the spiritual authorities in Islam, the philosophers, including philosophers that Al-Farabi. What we get in the future is based on what we do here on earth. Let's say, and then the Quran refers that we sow here on earth, we plough the fruits in hereafter. Yeah. So which means that if we are looking for happiness, then we should start here, right here. We can't wait for that we get future later. So happiness here on earth, and happiness, of course, in the hereafter. So let me go to the conclusion of my presentation here. Now, why is Alchemy of Happiness the crown of Islamic psychology? In other words, the peak achievement. Now, this is important in a sense. I try to summarize here in a few words. All right, why Alchemy of Happiness is central to Islamic psychology. In fact, that is just the highest thing. Prophetic psychology is this is not Ghazali. This is my conclusion, yeah? My appreciation, my argument why Alchemy of Happiness is the crown of Islamic psychology. I refer here to prophetic psychology because taking the arguments of Ghazali, I started my presentation, Ghazali's the Alchemy of Happiness by saying that each prophet taught his people alchemy of happiness. There was one of the prophetic function, more specifically the Sendi function, because each prophet wants to save the soul of his followers. Remember that. Each prophet sought to save the soul of his followers, the people to whom he was sent. So each prophet was a psychologist, and of course was an alchemist, not simply knowing psychology, nothing about the qualities of the soul. The prophets who was alchemists in the sense, in practice, they guided their followers to be healthy, spiritually speaking. In other words, their soul, they're in a state of happiness. They're in a state of happiness based on the guidance which they received from the prophet. So I'm saying that prophetic psychology, in particular, the psychology of the Prophet Muhammad SAW, that is the ideal that Islamic psychology over the centuries in Islamic history tries to emulate. It is the source of Islamic alchemy of happiness. Prophetic psychology is the source of Islamic alchemy of happiness, which Al-Ghazali presented in a clear and appealing way. If you read Alchemy of Happiness, it is simple, clear. It is meant for everybody. In a sense, it's not meant for elites. It's not meant for special kind of people. That is meant. It's open for everyone. In other words, happiness is something that the possibility of happiness that is open to everybody. It just depends on us whether we follow it according to the rules, according to the guidelines given. If we do that, then we'll be able to experience that. The main goal of Islamic psychology is to enable man to undertake the transformation of his or her soul, or the purification of the heart, so that his heart will fill in various degrees with happiness. Alchemy of happiness is the core concern of spiritual psychology. That is my conclusion. In other words, if we look at the vast field of that psychology, so you want to find what is the really core, what is the core concern of psychology in Islam, is none other than to seek happiness. And that remains, I think that remains the concern of Islamic psychology today, which some people call esoteric psychology, to differentiate from the modern secular psychology, or they call it spiritual psychology or metaphysical psychology. But the point is, it's something to do with the pursuit of salvation and happiness. That's it. My presentation. So was 1.5 hours. Sorry, taking that time. But I think many of you are interested in this, the pursuit of happiness, how to attain happiness. And nowadays, some people are thinking also how to make happiness as part of the kind of gross national product, to make their country or their cities a happy one. But what this Al-Ghazali presents maybe is good for them, to understand. But Al-Ghazali, of course, talking about spiritual happiness, not just this kind of transient happiness only for a certain time. So a lot of questions to be discussed. A lot of questions to be discussed about its nature of happiness. But at least Al-Ghazali is helping us to understand what prophetic psychology, what prophetic alchemy of happiness is all about. Thank you very much. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, dear Professor Osman. Thank you so much for a very beneficial and enlightening lecture. I think I speak for all of the participants, including the organizers and myself, that we really benefited from your very thorough presentation of what we can learn from the alchemy of happiness when it comes to utilizing it in a contemporary psychologically point of view from an Islamic perspective. May Allah bless you, Professor. Thank you so much for sharing all these gems. And please, round of applause to Professor Osman, dear participants, excellent brothers and sisters. Barakallahu feekum. We have a lot of questions, Professor Osman, as always. And people are very engaged in these topics, are very interested indeed. So with your permission, Professor, could we just go through some of the questions? Is it okay?
Yes, please. Yes, please.
All right. Barakallahu feekum, Ustad. We really appreciate it. So first and foremost, dear brothers and sisters, thank you so much for your engagement in the chat. So many excellent reflections and excellent questions. May Allah bless all of you. So let's start with Brother Amin. He's asking you, Professor Osman, can happiness be achieved without experiencing pain? Is experiencing pain in this worldly life an essential ingredient and a prerequisite to produce happiness in the next world?
Can you please slowly, please, read the question, the last part?
Of course. I can read it again, Professor. So, can happiness be achieved without experiencing pain? Is experiencing pain in this worldly life an essential ingredient and a prerequisite to produce happiness in the next world?
Yes, I mean, first of all, the human experience of pains every one of us, I think, experience in our life some form of pain, in referring to the physical pain, of course, but there's also the pain that we call suffering, kind of psychological pain. All right, the pains which some experience is a kind of psychological, and we use to say how it pains our heart, how it feels the pain. In other words, that is the nature of the world. All right, the world is not a perfect place. The world is a place where there is both happiness and sadness. There is both there is pain, there is sweetness and pain, but that is the challenge before us. The challenge before us. All right. In other words, to understand the reality that goes beyond this world of pain and suffering and death. Yeah, this world is a source of suffering, the source of death, the source of all kinds that are not considered as positive. All right. There's you have Buddhism, for example, which makes that as the best, as a starting point. The world is that kind of place. It's how to escape, how to transcend that world. So Islam is its own ways to that. In other words, that's what Ghazali say, use practical religion. Yeah, for Ghazali say, practical religion is the way that God has provided. God has provided through the prophets. The prophet personifies that. But the teaching is all based on revelation, based on the Quran. And this practical religion is based on the Quran, based on the prophetic hadith. So basically, how to overcome that? The question of, so in other words, the experience of pain in this world does not deprive us of giving happiness, not only in the hereafter, but even here, while here. Yeah. So those who undergo and the pain as a trial, and in the context of faith in God, knowing, understand why something happens to us. And this is, in other words, practical religion teaches us how to have the right attitudes, how to have the right spiritual attitudes towards all kinds of trials, the good and the bad, yeah, the suffering, the pain that we have. Let's say for the mothers who deliver their children, they have gone through that pain. What kind? The kind of pain that all mothers went through in delivering their children. Every time there is pain. But how you respond to that pain, how you withstand that pain, is a question of the mind, the question of the faith, yeah, the question of understanding what that pain means. That's going to be rewarded. That pain is going to be rewarded. So there are pains that are rewarded. There are pains that just simply doesn't mean anything. Yeah. So basically, the task for the believer is how to transform every kind of experience, good and bad, into something which will bring happiness to us here on earth, and of course in the human life. That's considered we pass the test. We pass the test. Yeah? Life is a test. Remember that? Islam teaches us that our whole life is a test from God. And that requires faith. So if we understand the purpose of life, all right? That's why Al-Ghazali is part of understanding ourselves. Know yourself. Yeah. He asked the questions. Who are we? Where do we come from? Where are we going? Why are we here on earth? If we understand all these questions, get the right answers, we will face the test, all the problems, we'll face life in the best of way. It's because we don't know really why we are here. What is the meaning of our life? Then we have second thought about many things. Yeah, I think basically that. Yeah. So basically, the experience of pain, pain, to put it another way, pain has value. Pain has value given the right understanding. So that why not we apply that to all kinds of experiences? How beautiful that life becomes beautiful. Okay, yeah. Thank you.
It becomes very beautiful, actually, when you say pain has a value. And the thing is, I think, Professor Osman, that we live in a society or in a reality, a modern reality, where pain is considered to not have any value. So we want to get rid of it. And that's why, you know, we have allopathic medicine as the normative medicine in West today, for instance. So by reimagining what pain should be from an Islamic spiritual point of view or psychological point of view, we add a value, and the value is to come closer to Allah, which is essentially what you said and referred to. Barakallahu feekum, Professor. Thank you so much. So there's a lot of questions. Next question is from Isham. Isham is wondering, Professor Osman, I wonder if happiness here is complete well-being spiritually and bodily.
Complete well-being spiritually and
bodily. Yeah, just
both physical and spiritual.
Yeah. So Islam is referring to if happiness is to be in complete well-being, both spiritually and physically.
Yes, that's the question.
Yes,
that's the ideal. In fact, that is the Prophet, and that's why I mean the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam is considered. In other words, we all say, we all believe, and the certainly confirmed by the companions, by his wives, his family. So as far as we are concerned, the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam is the most perfect of all people spiritually, but he also the most perfect in terms of physical well-being. Yeah? Because well-being or health in Islam is defined as the balance. It's a state of balance between all the different components of that entity. It means the human being. So the human being is body, soul, intellect, spirit, the heart. So all these different components of the human body work in a state of balance and equilibrium. It's very interesting that I read about the question of this. If I mentioned that in my book, Tawhid and Science, where I said that modern medicine does not have a definition of health. Definition in the real sense, it doesn't have. In other words, what is healthy? Healthy is no disease. In other words, it's not ill, and it's not ill. It's healthy, and it's just playing with words like that. But Ibn Sina defines health as that state of balance, of all the different components. So the Prophet Sallallahu is the ideal person here, is the model, because he has the perfect body, the perfect mind, the perfect intellect, the perfect soul, the perfect heart, and the perfect the spirit. So everything is perfect, not only individually, but together, taken together, and therefore the state of balance between all that. So illness is defined as the loss of that balance, and the role of medicine is to restore that balance. The role of medicine is to restore that balance. So the healthy person is the person who is in a state of balance, physically and spirituality. That is the ideal. That is we should strive for. Although in practice, all of us different experience different degrees of well-being, health. But there's no doubt what the ideal, what we should aim for, what we should strive for. Okay.
Barakallahu feekum. Barakallahu feekum, Professor. Thank you so much for your question. Let's move forward. I'm just trying to, there's so many questions here. Just 1 second, Professor. Yes. Just 1 second. Oh, 1 second. Something happened with the documents. I'm trying to adjust it. Yes, there it is. So thank you so much, Professor. Next question is from Ustad Hamidullah Marazi. He is asking, my question is how to contextualize Ghazalian view to modern man who doesn't believe in these unseen realities like soul, sa'adat, and life after death.
Yeah, that is a very difficult thing to resolve, yeah? Because this question is worldview. It's question of two different worldview. As for Al-Ghazali, it is clear. In other words, we must know who we are. So that in other words, the question of who am I, that is very important. The answer we give to that question will determine what kind of life we will lead, what kind of our life system of life. Even there's no possibility of making the two converge. They have to diverge because two different worldviews. But of course, as citizens of a country, for example, as members of society, we can coexist, but each person is responsible for the consequences of that worldview, of that having that worldview. So that's why if we refer to Alchemy, the book Alchemy of Happiness, in fact, Ghazali just dismissed. In fact, he was having argument, the kind of argument, how we argue with the what do you call that argument about whether life after death exists, whether there is life after that. And I mentioned that Ghazali posed that question back to those who deny, and he said, by asking that, do you mean that all the 124,000 prophets and all the saints of the world in the entire history of humankind, so all this, every time these prophets came, they were telling lies, they were not telling the truth about the future life? Is that so? So Ghazali said, if that person answered yes, they were lying, then he said, just say Assalamu alaikum. To that, I mean, there's nothing that you can dare. I mean, as far as the issue is concerned, there's nothing to debate. There's nothing to you can't at a particular level. Life, of course, in society, we'll see whatever thing that we can work together. We can coexist to the extent that we can coexist. But if I understand correctly, Professor Hamidullah, if I understand correctly your question, how can Al-Ghazali's views be psychological views be reconciled with what we have today, the current influence? Only to a certain extent, maybe certain to a certain extent. But of course, we can have dialogue. Yes, we can have dialogue and see where it can lead to. because at that level, at the level of belief, that level of review, it is very difficult to reconcile the two.
Barakallahu fikum, Professor. Thank you so much for a thorough answer to the question. We have a question from Mohd Shazani Masri, who's asking, how do we know that we are getting happier? Are there physical, psychological, or spiritual signs and markers?
You repeat that. How can we know?
How can we know that we are getting happier? Are there physical, psychological, and spiritual signs?
I'm trying to get to understand, how can we be happier?
So how can we know if we're getting happier, for instance? Are there any markers that we can look at spiritually, psychologically, and physically as with regards if we're becoming happier or not?
All right. Can I say the question, Tuni? In other words, how do we know that we make progress?
Exactly. How do we know that we're getting happier?
How do we know that we make progress in our spiritual life, in which, in a sense, we are happier than before? Well, happiness, despite some people want to now to come up with indexes, indicators of happiness, but as a whole, it's a more fundamental sense. Happiness cannot even be defined. The happiness cannot be defined. It's to be experienced. Happiness is to be experienced. If I say cannot be defined, means precisely to formulate indicators on how to measure happiness. You may measure to a certain extent, all right, but I don't think it is we are able to capture the deepest part of it, the most fundamental dimension of that happiness. But happiness is something to be experienced, and it is a state of the spiritual heart. All right, it is something that is to be experienced. Yes, it is the person who experienced that happiness knows, but how can he explain that to another person? That is not the question. But in other words, everybody knows, who experienced the experience, that he's in a state of happiness in terms of his yes, I mean there are external manifestations, yes, to that, in terms of how we react with people, how we respond to the way we behave, the way how we relate ourselves to other people. It's through those things. I mean, something which is best known by the individual himself or herself, but otherwise, it's very little that we can know whether we are happier than before, because it is, as I said, it is the state of the heart. Yeah, it's the state of the heart. Happiness means less worry. Yeah, so to have less worry is, yes, it's one indicator that but that's only you can self. Maybe yes, others can see from outside by looking how your face looks like, whether you are more serene, whether you're more serene in your face, more smile. Yes, you can do that kind of thing. I mean, you're a happier person than before. That much I can say. But if you want to now to come up with a program, a scientific research program, well, I'm not saying that it is not possible. It's possible, but to what extent? Yeah. So because there are now scientists in the West, I know, who are trying to measure this state of the heart, state of mind, and happiness by listing all the positive indicators of happiness. But how reliable? Whether what is outside really a manifestation of what's inside your heart? That is my question. Again, I'll say happiness is a state of the heart, the spiritual heart. Okay, Sazani?
MashaAllah, Professor Osman, such a thorough answer. And really something that just came to my mind is that in positive psychology, they're trying to do some, psychometrics and assessment tools for this. And perhaps this is something that we should engage in as Muslim psychologists or students or Islamic psychologists. Allah alam, it is a discussion right now. And I do see benefits in having assessment tools, of course. But there are also some questions with regards to assessment. What are we assessing? Can you assess spirituality? That is a question as well, that we need to discuss. But what you're explaining in such a thorough way is, in the end of the day, we need to reflect upon why we want these type of assessments and why it's important, and how, and maybe we could also utilize from the Tasawwuf tradition and how the sheikhs used to assess their students' state or hal, in a sense, when it comes to happiness or sa'adat or their spiritual journey as a suluk, and their suluk as a salik. So yeah, this is a question we need to continue, inshallah. Yes, please, Professor.
If I may add.
Yes, of course.
But with the help of Al-Ghazali, of course.
MashaAllah.
With the help of Ghazali. Well, for Al-Ghazali, I mean, I think, I've seen many different places in his writing. In other words, the most important signs of happiness, of a person's happiness, is to examine how close is that person to God. So, of course, we cannot know that what is inward, but at least in terms of outward manifestations of that person getting closer to God, in the sense of loving God, in other words, that person's love of God, signs that happiness, then yes, but it's based on different criteria that many people in the modern world are not appreciative, because they are looking for something more like social manifestations. Then that's something else, But Ghazali is not talking about social manifestation, So yes, by all means, do experiment that in terms of even the social manifestation. But for Ghazali, you should look into that person's relationship with God. The question now, how can we measure a person's proximity to God in terms of his behavior? We are going to go into his spiritual behaviors, which is different.
Do you think, Professor Osman, just as a final reflection, could we utilize the akhlaq tradition here? Because the akhlaq tradition gives us a lot of tools and how we can work with tahtib al-akhlaq and, to take away vices and add virtues. Is that a way to strengthen that capacity of spiritual ascendance, and also to perhaps, if we're working clinically, to in a sense, see how our clients are, on which state they are, spiritually or psychologically? What do you think?
No, I think it is very good. Just that suggestion is very good. In fact, there is a very strong basis for that, which is not unrelated to what I said about the a person's proximity to God, terms of residence. Because what is akhlaq, after all? The whole of the akhlaq means is about a person's relationship with God, relationship with humankind, what you could say, hablum min Allah, hablum min nas, and by extension even with the environment. Nowadays, certainly is very important. So again, looking into that, the improvement in the qualitative improvement of relationship between a person and Allah, and his relationship with a fellow human being, particularly say in the family, in terms of family relationship, in terms of all the relationship with groups that already mentioned according to the Quran. Yeah. In other words, for example, how our relationship with the orphan, relationship with the poor, relations, all those different groups that need special treatment, attention from us. Yeah. So for akhlaq is to be measured again in terms of the Prophet's Muhammad's behavior. Yeah. In other words, that point about our proximity, our growing closeness to Allah is reflected also in the sense of our relationship with the Prophet, our love for the Prophet. How, in what ways is our love for the Prophet manifested? Yes, I think that even though the point is there are still a lot that can be done. There's still a lot that can be done by a Muslim psychologist wants to do experimental or to come up with these manifestations, even at the level of society, social manifestation. Thank you.
Barakallahu feekum, Professor Osman. Thank you so much for being so generous with your time. We're already 10 minutes overdue, so we will end the session now. Thank you all for your excellent questions, dear excellent participants, brothers and sisters from all over the world. We got through some of them, and some of them we didn't go through, inshallah. We have one more session left with Professor Osman, so perhaps we can ask those questions. And the final session, September the 17th, Saturday, the September the 17th, you're all more than welcome. We will email out the assessment for this session, plus the slides within 3 days, and we will also upload the recording on ISIP's YouTube channel. Thank you once more, Professor Osman, for being so generous. Such an honor to have you as our teacher, and such an honor for all of us to learn from you. I want to thank Sister Fatima Ahmed, for the project coordinator for this initiative. Thank you so much for all the great gems you're also sharing in the Zoom chat. And also I want to thank Sister Mariati, who is helping out from ISIP to organize and structure things today as well. Barakallahu feekum, sister. You're both doing an amazing job. Thanks to all brothers and sisters for your questions and for your efforts and for your excitement and for your knowledge. We're very honored to be with all of you. And please forgive us for any shortcomings as organizers. I take personal responsibility for that, and all the good comes from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and all the mistakes are solidly mine. Without any further ado, Professor Bakar, would you like to end with a dua, closing dua with all of us, inshallah?
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillah rabbil alamin, wa salatu wa salamu ala shafil al-mursalin sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Allahumma inna nas'aluka ridqal jannah wa bika min sakatika wan nar. Allahumma inna nas'aluka ridqal jannah wa bika min sakatika wan nar. Allahumma inna nas'aluka ridqal jannah. Rabbana atina fid dunya hasanah wa fil akhirati hasanah wa qina adhaban nar. Subhana rabbika rabbil izzati amma yasifun. Salamun ala al-mursalin walhamdulillahi rabbil alamin.